Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're unpacking a mystery that I think pretty much every single person listening has bumped into at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you're a parent trying to get your kid to use an educational app, a manager rolling out new software, or just, someone who downloaded a language app to learn French and then never opened it again.
Right. It's that classic gap between buying the treadmill and actually running on it.
Exactly. But the stakes for what we're talking about today are way higher than a forgotten New Year's resolution. We are talking about the global crisis in education.
Yeah. And the sales pitch for years has been so seductive.
Oh, incredibly seductive. The idea is just give a kid a tablet, right? Load it up with the world's best software AI tutors, adaptive learning, and boom, geography doesn't matter, poverty doesn't matter, education is democratized.
It's what we call the silver bullet theory. We really, really want to believe that the tool itself does the work.
Right, but if you've been paying attention, we've all seen the other side of that coin. The tablets get bought, the big press release goes out, and then 6 months later...
They're gathering dust in a storage closet.
Or the kids have hacked them to play unauthorized games. The promised learning revolution just never actually shows up.
And that's not just some cynical anecdote. That is the literal story of the last decade of EdTech. Billions and billions spent on hardware. And the results on the ground are incredibly mixed. Often, statistically speaking, they're just zero.
So that is our mission today. We're going to break down a massive field experiment out of India that might have finally cracked this code.
Yeah, it's a fascinating study.
It's from 2026 by Oreopoulos, Keys-Krasakowski, and Agarwal, using data from the Center for Economic Policy Research. And what's so wild to me is that the solution they found wasn't better AI or faster processors. It was something much more... boring.
I wouldn't call it boring. I'd actually say it's profoundly human.
Fair enough. Let's get into it. So the study focuses on the state of Uttar Pradesh. But before we look at the solution, we have to understand the sheer scale of the problem they were dealing with.
Right. We hear the term widening achievement gap thrown around in policy circles a lot.
Yeah, but what does that actually look like for you, the listener, if you were to walk into one of these classrooms?
To really feel the weight of this, you have to visualize it. We're looking at government boarding schools in India. Imagine walking into an average 8th grade math class there.
Okay, so I'm picturing kids who are, 13, 14 years old?
Yeah, exactly. And you'd expect them to be learning early algebra, maybe some geometry. But the data from this study is stark. On average, these 8th graders are performing 4 grade levels below where they should be.
4 grade levels.
4 grade levels.
So you have teenagers physically sitting in an 8th grade classroom, but mathematically,
they are grappling with 3rd or 4th grade concepts. They haven't mastered basic multiplication or division yet.
that sounds like an absolute nightmare for the teacher.
It's functionally impossible. That's the structural chasm we're talking about. You literally cannot teach a standard syllabus to a room where the skill levels range from 3rd grade all the way to 8th grade.
Right, because if the teacher moves at the syllabus pace, half the class is instantly lost.
And if they slow down to catch those kids up, the advanced kids are bored to tears and acting out.
It's a lose-lose. And this is usually the exact moment where the tech companies swoop in and say, hey, we can fix this. Because software doesn't care about the average, it personalizes.
That is exactly the pitch.
Yeah.
Computer-assisted learning should theoretically be the perfect fix here. If you're at a 4th grade level, the software just gives you 4th grade problems.
Right.
It meets you exactly where you are. It scales that personalization in a way a single human teacher just can't do for 30 kids at once.
So why hasn't it worked? I mean, that logic seems completely bulletproof.
Well, this brings us to what's known as the technology paradox. If you look at the broad data on EdTech interventions, and VoxEU has a really telling graph on this, the results are wildly volatile.
Volatile how? Like up and down?
It's mostly just noise. Some classrooms see a spike in learning, others see absolutely nothing. Some actually see negative results because the tech just becomes a distraction.
Oh, wow.
The key insight here is that technology acts as a force multiplier for the system you already have.
Oh, I see. So if your underlying system is chaotic, the tech just amplifies the chaos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The researchers point out that low fidelity, which is just academic speak for poor implementation, increases the likelihood of weak student outcomes. The promise is personalization, but the reality is expensive hardware sitting unused because the human system around it is broken.
Okay, so let's look at how they tried to fix that broken system in Uttar Pradesh. They ran this huge experiment in 105 schools. What was the setup?
They really didn't cut any corners here. They partnered with Khan Academy, which is arguably the gold standard for adaptive learning.
Yeah, I use Khan Academy. It's fantastic.
It is world-class software. And for the initial rollout, which they call the standard model, they did everything the experts usually recommend. They didn't just dump the tablets and run.
Right, which is a usual mistake.
Exactly. They provided extensive teacher training. They set up WhatsApp support channels for the staff. They had a technical helpline. They even set a very clear performance target of 120 minutes of practice per student per month.
I have to say, that sounds like a remarkably solid plan. If I were on a school board, I'd sign off on that in a heartbeat. You've got the best software, trained teachers, tech support. It sounds like a guaranteed win.
And that is exactly why this specific study is so important, because that solid plan, that standard model, failed completely.
Failed, like the test scores didn't go up.
Failed, as in nobody even used it. When they actually looked at the back-end data, the usage was abysmal. On average, students were logging in for less than one session per month.
Less than one session a month out of a target of 120 minutes.
It actually gets worse.
Yeah.
44% of the registered students never logged in at all.
Never. Not even once.
Not a single time.
Wow. Okay, so nearly half the kids didn't even touch this world-class solution. Why? I mean, was the internet constantly down? Did the teachers just hate the software?
No, it wasn't hatred at all. It was overwhelm. We really have to empathize with these teachers. Remember that classroom dynamic we described?
Right, trying to bridge a 4-year learning gap.
Exactly. They have massive administrative duties, high-stakes exam prep, behavioral issues. When you add manage 30 tablets and login passwords to that list, it just becomes the thing that gets pushed to the bottom of the pile.
It becomes an optional supplement.
Precisely. And in a highly resource-constrained environment, optional just means non-existent. The teachers viewed it as another burden on their overflowing plates. So the tablets stayed in the cupboard.
Okay, so this brings us to the real pivot of the study. The researchers look at this massive failure. They know Khan Academy works when it's used, but nobody is using it. So they realize the problem isn't the tech.
Right. And this is the crucial shift in thinking. The whole hypothesis changes. It's no longer a question of platform quality. It becomes a question of organizational capacity.
Break that down for us. What do you mean by organizational capacity?
Think of it as the human infrastructure required to actually run the machine. The researchers referenced an older study on a software called MindSpark. In that study, as soon as they reduced the human support staff in the computer lab, usage dropped by half.
Oh, so the tech literally cannot survive on its own.
Exactly. The hypothesis was that technology needs a dedicated human scaffold to survive in a complex school ecosystem.
So how did they build that scaffold in Uttar Pradesh? What was the actual solution they tested?
They introduced a totally new role in a treatment group of 83 schools. They called it the lab in charge. They hired a person whose one and only job was implementation fidelity.
Lab in charge. Sounds very official. But what were they actually doing day to day? Were they specialized math tutors?
No, and that is what's so fascinating. They weren't there to teach the quadratic formula. They weren't even necessarily subject matter experts. They were just there to manage the process of learning.
So they're basically a project manager for the computer lab.
That's exactly it. Their mandate was purely logistical. Guarantee that every student gets their weekly sessions. Troubleshoot the Wi-Fi the second it drops. Make sure the tablets are charged before the kids walk in. Monitor the dashboard to see who is actually engaged.
And crucially, this wasn't like an optional after-school club, right?
Right. They formally integrated this into the regular school timetable.
Right.
It wasn't go to the lab if you finish your work early. It was Tuesday at 10 a.m. is mandatory Khan Academy time, and the lab in charge is taking attendance.
That distinction between optional and timetabled seems huge. But did it actually move the needle? Or was it just, another layer of bureaucracy standing in the room while kids clicked around?
Oh, the results were immediate and honestly explosive. If you look at the graph of practice time in the source material, it literally looks like a hockey stick.
Give us the numbers.
There was a 6.6-fold increase in weekly practice time.
6 times.
Yes. The standard model group, the control group, hovered around 7.2 minutes of practice a week.
Okay.
The lab in charge schools shot up to about 47.4 minutes per week.
That is a massive difference, from 7 minutes to almost an hour.
And it was sustained. This wasn't just a shiny new toy effect where usage spikes for a month and then drops off. It held incredibly steady for 31 weeks. Even after holidays or extended breaks, usage bounced right back up to that 47-minute mark.
That really shows the power of having a human being whose entire job description depends on that line staying high. But I do want to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
I can force a teenager to sit in front of a screen for 47 minutes. That definitely doesn't mean they're actually learning anything. They could just be staring at the wall or clicking random multiple choice buttons to look busy. Did the study account for that kind of fake engagement?
It's a great question. The classic engagement versus learning worry. But the data here is really reassuring. They measured quality, not just quantity.
How do you measure quality on an app?
They looked at actual skills mastered. The Khan Academy software tracks when a student completes a module and passes the proficiency check. And the students in the lab in charge schools mastered one additional skill for every hour of practice compared to the control group.
Oh, wow. So they were actually much more efficient with their screen time.
Highly efficient. The physical supervision ensured focus. The lab in charge would walk around, see if a kid was just staring at the screen or distracted, and gently nudge them back on task. They actively converted time on device into productive learning.
Okay, so engagement is way up, skills mastered are up. But the holy grail of education policy is always the actual PES score outcome. Did this intervention actually help these kids catch up on those 4 missing years of math?
It did. The gains were massive. The study reports learning outcomes with a gain of 2.5 to 0.47 standard deviations.
Okay, pause right there. 0.47 standard deviations. I hear that, and my eyes kind of glaze over. It sounds tiny. Is that a small number? What does that actually mean for the listener?
I know it sounds small to a layperson, but in the world of education economics, that is an enormous effect size. Let me translate that using a metric from researchers Evans and Yuan.
Please do.
In the context of low to middle income countries, a gain of 0.47 standard deviations is equivalent to roughly 2 to 3 years of typical schooling.
Wait, hold on. 2 to 3 entire years?
Yeah.
In how much time?
The intervention lasted exactly 31 weeks, so about 7 months.
That is absolutely wild. So in 7 months, with this software and a lab in charge, these kids gain what usually takes 2 or 3 years of standard education.
Correct. It essentially closed a massive chunk of that widening achievement gap we talked about at the very beginning. It shifted the average student from the 50th percentile all the way up to the 67th percentile. The entire bell curve of the classroom just shifted to the right.
That is the big aha moment for me. We aren't talking about marginal incremental gains here. We are talking about catch-up speed that we almost never see in public education. But, and there's always a but, I have to ask about the cost.
Of course.
You hired a dedicated staff member for every single school. That sounds incredibly expensive. Usually when we see test results this good, it's because some NGO threw unlimited money at a tiny pilot program.
And that is where this gets really exciting for anyone in policy or management. Let's compare the costs. If you want these kinds of catch-up results using human tutoring like actual one-on-one math tutors, it costs thousands of dollars per student. It is completely unscalable.
Right. You can't hire a private tutor for every kid in the country.
Exactly. Even other EdTech interventions, like that MindSpark study we mentioned earlier, they achieved only half this effect size, and it took them double the time, 18 months.
Okay, so what was the price tag on the lab in charge model?
The total cost came out to $24 per student annually.
$24. That's the price of a couple of movie tickets.
$24 for 2 to 3 years of learning gains. It is incredibly cost-effective because you aren't hiring a PhD in mathematics. You are hiring a basic manager. The scalability is built right in.
Because anyone can do it.
Right? You can use paraprofessionals, local high school graduates, part-timers, or even just reallocate existing administrative staff. As long as that one mandate implementation fidelity is fiercely protected, the model works.
I really want to dig into that mechanism a bit more, what you called management quality. What exactly is this $24 a year lab in charge doing that a regular, highly trained teacher just couldn't squeeze in?
It really comes down to 4 pillars working together to create that management quality. First is protected time.
Because it's on the schedule.
Exactly. It happens no matter what. A regular teacher might skip the computer lab session if they're behind on the syllabus, or if there's a school assembly, or if they're just tired. The lab in charge doesn't skip it because it's their only job. They protect the time slot.
Consistency is everything.
Second is troubleshooting. This is honestly the silent killer of all tech adoption. If a tablet freezes or the school Wi-Fi drops, a classroom teacher might lose 20 minutes trying to fix it, and the class just descends into chaos.
And then they just give up and go back to the textbook.
Exactly. But the lab in charge fixes it immediately because that's what they're paid to do.
Yeah.
It removes the friction.
Friction is usually what kills habits. Okay,
Right.
what's the third pillar?
Monitoring. They are actively watching the software dashboard. They can see in real time if student A has been stuck on the same fractions question for 10 minutes, and they can intervene. And finally, the fourth pillar is motivation.
Like cheering them on?
Yeah, they ran little campaigns, class competitions, small rewards. They kept the energy high, and the kids excited to log in.
It sounds like they basically created a culture of accountability around the software.
Accountability is the exact right word. That human layer transforms the technology from a passive, optional tool into an active, managed program.
This really changes the conversation for any institution looking at EdTech. We've spent the last 10 years asking, which software should we buy?
And that is the wrong question. Or at least it's a very incomplete question. The researchers put it perfectly in the policy imperative section. They said the question is not which technology to adopt, but how to guarantee implementation fidelity.
Implementation fidelity. I feel like that should be written on the whiteboard of every school district IT department.
It really should. The advice from this whole deep dive is clear. Don't just buy the technology. If a government has a budget of $1 million, don't spend all million on the tablets and the software licenses. Spend some of it on the tech and spend the rest building the organizational structure, the actual human beings to support it.
It's funny because we are hearing so much about AI right now. Every single day there's a new article saying AI tutors are the future of education. But listening to this data, I'm thinking the best AI tutor in the world is completely useless if the student never actually turns it on.
Precisely. And that's why this lesson is totally future-proof. Whether it's the Khan Academy of today or the VR classroom headsets of tomorrow or some hyper-advanced AI of next year, the bottleneck is almost never the tech itself.
It's us.
Exactly. The bottleneck is human behavior and the organizational capacity to use the tool consistently.
So let's bring this all together. We started with this massive widening achievement gap in India 8th graders who are 4 years behind. We tried the standard tech fix and it failed completely because the teachers were just too overwhelmed to use it.
Right.
But then we added a dedicated human layer, the lab in charge, whose only job was to manage the process, not the content. And suddenly we saw a 6.6 times explosion in usage and learning gains equivalent to years of schooling, all for about $24 a student.
That is the perfect synthesis. The formula we've been getting wrong is thinking that technology equals learning. The actual proven formula is technology plus implementation capacity equals sustained learning.
It's a really powerful equation, and honestly, it makes me think about where else in life this applies.
That is exactly what I'd want you, the listener, to walk away thinking about. Because this isn't just a story about middle schools in Uttar Pradesh. Think about healthcare apps or massive corporate training rollouts or even just our own personal habits. We constantly buy the tech, the fitness tracker, the productivity software, the language app.
And then we let it sit there, gathering digital dust.
Right. So the really provocative question here is this. If a $24 a year human layer can unlock the potential of billion-dollar software for a kid in a rural school, what other failed technologies in our own lives are really just missing a lab in charge to manage them? What if the missing piece in your company's big digital transformation isn't better software, but just better implementation management?
That is such a great question to end on. Maybe we all need to hire a personal lab in charge for our lives.
I know I could use one.
Thank you so much for breaking all this data down with us. It's a surprisingly hopeful story, really. It shows that the tools actually do work if we just build the right systems around them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The potential is definitely there. We just had to build the human bridge to reach it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Think about your own implementation fidelity this week, and we'll catch you next time.